Kia ora, everyone. A very warm welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrea, and some of you might know me. I work for the PSA in the policy team, and I will be your MC today. Some of you might have heard Sophie and I are both new to doing webinars. So bear with us if there are any issues that we might have to solve, but we had a few practice runs, so we hope this will be all working fine and will be really interesting and, well, stimulating, thought-provoking for you all. So this will be a series of webinars that we are organizing between now and September. It will be part of a new book that we are going to release after these webinars, and it's called Progressive Thinking and Possible Futures for Our Public and Community Services. And some of you might know this series because we have published already, I think, 3 books on it, on the topic of taxes, housing, and the future of work. So this will be our 4th progressive thinking book, and hopefully of interest to you. If you haven't seen the other ones, check them out on our website. You can find them all there. This book will include a number of chapters from a variety of people. One of them will be Sophie, and we are using those chapters as a basis for our webinar discussions. So how are we going to run this webinar today? Before I will introduce Sophie a little bit, Sophie will talk about her chapter that she already drafted a little bit and share some thoughts, maybe some concrete examples, maybe what we can all do to support a just transition into the future. And after that, we will have a bit of a chat. I have lots and lots of questions for Sophie, and surely you will have lots of questions as well. So now, Sophie, a very warm welcome to you as well. Amazing to talk to you here on the webinar on Zoom. We had a bit of a conversation yesterday, and you told me that you're a bit of a doer, a helper, and a mover, which of course is clearly reflected in your community work, especially with regards to the environment and the social action that you're participating in. So I was wondering if you want to maybe explain what you mean by doer, helper, and mover a little bit, and maybe give us a bit of an idea who you are as a person.
Yeah, sure. I think some of those definitely do need probably a little bit of explanation. So, kia ora te whānau. My name's Sophie Handford, as was mentioned by Andrea, and I'm 19 years old and I live in the sunny Pukenga, and it's great to hear that a lot of you are also in sunny places at this time as well. So the reason why I mentioned those 3 words, I'll begin with doer. I'm someone that likes to kind of find gaps and try and think up different ways that those could be filled, but not only think up ways, but really try and put them into action. So with the School Strike for Climate, for example, that's kind of what happened with a group of us young people noticing a gap in that public pressure being put on our leaders. So decided to kind of fill that gap and create a place for young people to have their voice heard in that conversation. In terms of a mover, I think that kind of comes into play in a few different ways. I like to be quite active and fill my days. So I tend to like being on the move, whether it's just moving from one Zoom call to the next, or whether it's going out for a run or jumping in the sea. All of those kinds of things are things that I enjoy doing with my day. And, what was the other one that I said, Andrea? Helper. A mover. Helper. There we go. Thank you. So I think in terms of that, I kind of always feel the need to help in some way, that I can be helpful, and that's something that I think has been instilled in me quite strongly by my parents, them being extremely helpful to those around them, and then I obviously noticed that as a kid, but also them, both of them being very helpful and kind to our planet. So through my dad's work he's a sustainable land use consultant and works a lot with land management and working alongside iwi and tangata whenua and farmers or people from different communities. So he's always been kind of a helper. He helps the land, and my mum works at Play Centre, so she helps young kids in that early stage of their life to experience creativity through play. So I've kind of got that element of me too, which I like to try and embrace, and try and also think up solutions to help my community in any way that I can. And yeah, obviously I'm kind of developing that all the time. And yeah, so that's kind of come out through School Strike for Climate, and then further my running to be the Paikakiri Kiromati Ward Councillor in Kapiti on the Kapiti Coast District Council, and was honoured to be elected into that position by my community. So for me, like reimagining New Zealand's journey to a zero carbon future and reimagining what that journey looks like for a just transition, bringing our public service and community service into it too, is what my chapter is about, and something that I've had a lot of fun jotting down ideas for. And I think at the moment, the importance of this is so evident.
Audience, we are launching straight into the chapter now.
Yeah, we're going into the chapter. If you have any questions about me, those can come at the end, but this is important stuff,
that's
guys.
Fantastic, Sophie. Yeah, please continue. Just tell us a little bit about the chapter. That would be fantastic, yeah.
Okay, sure. So the importance of reimagining New Zealand's journey to a zero carbon future, and reimagining what this looks like for public and community service in terms of a just transition. We have a real incredible opportunity at the moment, right now, due to the situation we're in with COVID-19, and as we respond and move out of these alert levels, to really imagine what that looks like. So I think that's why also this is so important at this time, because obviously the climate crisis isn't going away. And we have a really awesome opportunity to be able to harness some of the kind of blank canvas space that we have at the moment, it feels like, and to rethink the way that systems operate in some ways. So I talk a little bit about kind of my experience here in Kapiti. We're a seaside community, and I live in Pukenga, as I mentioned, which is right by the ocean too. So coastal erosion and adaptation is a really prominent issue for the coast, and there have been kind of conversations which have been difficult to have around, some people being really concerned about their property values, while others more concerned about the future of our coast for generations to come. And obviously those 2 points can be held in the same breath and by the same person, but it does throw up some really difficult conversations, but it's important that we have those conversations too. So I think through that process, bringing people with us, no matter different views, and trying to really co-design things and understand people's different perspectives and people's different situations when it comes to responding to climate change. Obviously, some will be more equipped with the resource to be able to adapt, because our society isn't 100% equal, and often those people who have done the least to cause the crisis will have also the least amount of means to respond and to adapt. So thinking all about that and tying that all up into one point that I've made quite clear in my chapter, I hope, is around the importance of community resilience and around community solutions to local problems and to local contexts. And I think that through community services and through public service, we can really create capacity in our communities. And that's what I've seen through COVID-19 as well. I've seen, groups in communities being set up to support each other. Alongside a friend, I set up self-isolation support Kapiti. So our aim was to try and build capacity in our community for them to volunteer for one another. But the same thing can happen in relation to climate. We can build that capacity and resilience in our communities to make sure that people have the tools and the knowledge, the understanding, and the connections to be able to kind of understand what climate change might mean for them and what it might mean if we don't mitigate and adapt to climate change. So talking about that, as I said, the importance of taking people with us, putting climate change at the heart of our decision making. And obviously it's an issue which umbrellas so many other things, and There are so many different factors that weave into climate change, and so many different things we can do to leverage change in the area. Community resilience and building that being one of them, and being a very important way. So that's social infrastructure, not only actual physical infrastructure, but also social infrastructure too. And it means owning up to what's not working. So if something's not working, we've got to change it, because we don't have time to just continue kind of rolling down the same path that we're on. If we know that it's harming our planet, and we know that we need a just transition, we actually need to just stand up and say that, maybe the way we're doing things isn't working, and that there needs to be a change in the way our public service and our community service engages with the community, and the way that whole system works, the way our policies developed, and what kind of things we value in that regard. So, I mean, my chapter's a bit of everything, really.
I love your energy and the force of your thought. It's amazing. And I see we already have a few questions. And one of the questions is around a just transition. What do we actually understand by a just transition?
Yeah, great question. And I'd be keen to hear potentially your thoughts too on this, Andrea. But my idea of what a just transition would be is that no one would be left behind. So we would be designing what our transition to a zero carbon economy or a zero carbon future looks like, alongside those who will be most affected. So for example, people whose job will be affected, so say the agricultural industry, for example, that makes up for around half of our total emissions here in New Zealand. The response and the shift to that economy, or that way of living where we're trying to reduce our emissions to zero, needs to be done alongside and with talking to those farmers, because if we don't, then their whole well-being and their life is then just tipped on its head. And ultimately, like, people need to be at the heart of why we're doing this. We're doing this for people. We're doing this so that, and for our animals too, obviously, but we need to make sure that we have a future to pass on to generations to come. And we can't do that if we're kind of taking people's lives away from them in doing that, and not bringing them along for that journey, those who will be affected the most. So I think it's just about recognizing that throughout this transition, there will be people who will be affected more than others, and it's about how we can bring them along to make sure that there's justice, and to make sure that they have to make sure that they have kind of a say in what the transition looks like as well, and they know how it will impact them, so they can start to kind of prepare for that as well.
Yeah, it's also about I guess moving, or when you're thinking about people, and you mentioned the farmer, that you have to bring along on that journey to stop climate change from happening. Other people in other industries might have to move to other industries as well that are more sustainable, for example, renewable energies rather than coal and gas or oil exploration, for example, in the Taranaki region. And how do you ensure that people can transition from one industry into the other without compromising their income, their families, their livelihoods, their housing, their children's education? I think that all plays a really important role in a just transition as well. And another element that you referred to earlier that would be, I think, very important is the community engagement in designing how you develop that just transition, right? That's essential, because politicians won't know it all, or other people, other decision makers won't know it all. You need to build on the community, on the unions, for example, in those industries, to actually find the best possible solutions for a just transition that considers the social impacts, but also the environmental aspects. I think that will be really important from my experience.
Yeah, definitely. And what I've found too, through even just through being on the council in the last kind of 6 months, the amount of knowledge and experience and skills of people in our community whose knowledge and expertise is kind of going untapped. And these people have such energy and passion and knowledge to bring to this conversation. So making sure that those people are a part of it and get to design what it looks like too in some kind of visual way, so that it's accessible to people. This shouldn't be like a just transition, in my opinion, shouldn't be about like creating a 500-page document about all of these different shifts that we need to make or the conversations we've had. It should be a one-page image. And I think, Andrea, you mentioned yesterday the Taranaki 2050 roadmap as being a good example of that, where they were kind of mapping out their way to a just transition, or what that journey looks like to making sure that they're doing everything they can for climate change and to mitigate the crisis. And similar things are happening too in my local community. My friend and I have been working on a project around re-envisioning the Kapiti community spirit, and that's kind of also tying back into respecting and coexisting with the environment. So how can we create a community spirit that feeds back into the environment to allow it to be sustainable, and how do we encourage each other as community members to kind of create that environment that we all want. And that's something that we're just putting into a page, and we've got an illustrator on board, and we've collated people's ideas and feedback around ways that they want to feed into that vision for what Kapiti might look like as we move out of these alert levels. So there's things like that happening in communities, and it's pretty exciting, actually, in my view.
And that relates to the importance of community as such, but the wider social infrastructure, right? I realize that is a term that not everybody is familiar with as well. I guess we are all familiar with investment in infrastructure, which usually is economic infrastructure, material infrastructure like roads and housing and buildings and the likes. But what do we mean by social infrastructure, and why do you think it's so important? I think it's strongly related to COVID as well, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of understanding or my view on social infrastructure, and obviously I think people can have different definitions of this as well, because it's quite a wide term. But is that ability or that infrastructure to, as I said earlier, like create capacity in community, and to kind of empower communities. So setting processes up and setting systems up which allow that to happen. And I've also just seen something come in through the Q&A around Te Ao Māori, and I just want to touch on that too, because I think that we can talk about investing in social capital, or we can talk about investing in social infrastructure or infrastructure, but I think it's also important to recognize that there are some things out there that actually don't almost need investment in, but instead need us to just kind of all pay attention to and listen to and understand more. For example, the values that Māori hold in this conversation, and kaitiakitanga being one of them, guardianship and protection of the land, and manaakitanga, kotahitanga, unity. So all of these concepts that have been around for so many years, and truly championed by Māori, how can we, and this is something that I myself want to learn more about too, is kind of how that all fits into social social infrastructure, and that being a really important part of social infrastructure, those ideas of manaakitanga, and really creating that atmosphere where people feel like they're able to have their voice heard in their social kind of circles or in their like community. But I'd be interested again to hear your thoughts on this too, Andrea, quickly.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I support everything that you said. And to me, it also links to actually public and community services, right? It's if we invest into community and social services particularly, it will strengthen our communities, bring them together, and contribute to them participating actually in political decision making as well, because you can't expect people to go about their busy lives without any support that might be needed. and politically engage and put the energy into environmental projects, for example, as you just explained. It's really hard. So for me, public and community services play a huge role as well. And that leads me actually to another question that we got from the audience, but also one that I had very high up on my list, is how public and community services contribute, and the investment into public and community services contribute to a just transition, or to stopping climate change.
I would say that COVID-19 as an example has shown us the importance of community when we're forced to change. And I think that through that whole process, and through this whole process of kind of being in lockdown and having to really make sure that everyone around us is all right, and making sure that they've got what they need, I think has kind of been a way to show us the importance of community. And I think for public and community service to be able to develop that community and to be able to support those communities better, and like in a more resourced, in a further resourced way, then that allows communities to kind of help themselves. Obviously with COVID-19, as I said, we've kind of been forced to change, and we needed to change to make sure that we do save lives. And the same is the case, and will continue to be the case with climate change. Like we have to change, and community has played such an important role in our ability to change really quickly in the situation we're in with COVID-19. So I think that the same will be the case, and the same is the case and will continue to be the case with climate change. Through council as well, I've seen, that there are definitely ways and things that I'm passionate about trying to see what I can do to change in terms of the way that the opportunities people have to engage with bodies like local governments. Because, for example, the meetings happen on the Thursday during the school day, and that means that for a young person or for someone who's at school to actually turn up and be a part of those conversations is nearly impossible if they miss school. So how can we kind of shape public and community service in a way that allows for as many people as possible to be able to engage with it, so that we create the best solutions that suit everyone?
I guess there's probably, like so often, there's no one size fits all solution. It's about, I guess, thinking how we co-design or co-create, that community engagement and policies that come from that engagement. So I guess in most circumstances, it's probably related to using many different ways of creating opportunities for people to engage.
Exactly, and at all kinds of different levels. I mean, that's what we tried to do with the strike. So there were ways to get involved by just signing a petition, or you could write a letter to an MP, or you could show up to the strike, or you could help organise. So I think there needs to be those different levels of people to engage with public and community service in a way that meets them where they're at, and then that allows more people to be able to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, fantastic, thanks. Some ministries are using the co-design process for developing policies, but it's really in its infancy. So it's a topic that I think will be very relevant for the public and community services in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's such an important concept, especially for a just transition too. As we've talked about, I think that links pretty much directly in. And I think also it's important before kind of co-designing something, for each party to have an understanding of what co-design actually means, and the way that relationship will work. Because I feel like sometimes the idea of co-design can be seen as like a way of saying, a way of essentially saying, like, we will come up with something here and we'll come back to you, and then you can have some input, and then we'll feed it back into this thing over here. And it's a way of kind of saying, yeah, we want to co-design, but actually, like, this is how it's going to work. But realistically, I think if we were properly co-designing, there would be a completely blank slate, and two groups would come together, or you'd have an individual or a community, and public service, and those groups would come together, or iwi obviously fitting into that too, would come together with, you know, a blank slate or an idea, and that's co-design.
And I guess making the decisions at the end, right? That not you're sharing your ideas, you're developing policy, but then in the end, someone else decides what's going to happen. So I think that is a very important part of the co-design or co-creation process, to be involved in the final decision making and how it's implemented actually as well, not just designed but also realized. I would like to go to another question, and it's around, you know, the experience that very often the environment or environmental policies are a nice to have rather than a must. And you highlighted the importance of environmental policies to be at the center of policy making and policy decisions. So the big question really is, how do we make that happen? How do we bring it to the center of attention and actually convince people that it is not just a nice to have, something we can do if we have spare money in our pockets, that it becomes a must. And I think that question is particularly important, or will be particularly important after the COVID-19 experience, because there will be a strong focus on the economy and on the importance for people to earn a living. So how do we bring those two together, or can we bring them together? Economic recovery, but also actually environmental recovery.
I mean, first of all, answering the last part of that, yes, I think we can. And I think it's about recognizing kind of the tipping point almost that we're at right now, with us obviously running out of time to take the required action to be able to limit our warming to no more than 1.5 degrees, or hopefully meet our targets that we have signed up to in global agreements, but also our Zero Carbon Act targets too. And I think it's about recognizing that point we're at now, where we have essentially the choice, or our leaders have the choice as well, about whether we use this as an opportunity to move forward. And we do have that lens and that way of having climate change at the heart of all decisions, which I'll talk about a little bit too. But also, we really do run the risk, I think, right now of just completely letting all of this go. And of not recognizing the ability and the importance of talking about these two concepts of recovery and response and climate change and environmental sustainability in the same breath. And I think, this really, as I said earlier, this really is a chance to re-envision what we want that to look like. But I think it's about recognizing that now, and right in this very moment and in these next few years, or even these next few weeks and months, we're making a choice about the kind of future that we want to have passed on to future generations. And I mean, it very much feels like that to me, because as a young person and working alongside lots of young people also in this space, we're very much aware of what our reality could be if we don't take action, and we're very much aware of how kind of easily that reality, if we don't take action, could become our future if we don't use this opportunity. So I think it's about continuing to talk about the kind of planet we want to pass on, whether we'd be proud of ourselves if we just let this slip by and kind of let climate change really catch up on us and didn't do anything about it. Would we be proud of that? Would we be proud to be talking to our children, and when they asked us what we did about climate change when we knew about it, would we be proud to say that we actually just didn't do anything at all? I think it's about talking about that. And in terms of how we put climate change at the heart of all of our decisions, I think that comes in many different ways. I think having public pressure and using our people power movements like School Strike, Generation Zero, who drafted the Zero Carbon Bill, and that's now an act. We've got incredible Indigenous youth climate groups as well, Te Ara Whatu, Pacific Climate Warriors, For the Culture, so all those groups, putting pressure on the government to make sure that they know there's a social mandate for them to put climate change at the heart of all decision making. And I think that that's almost where it has to start, is as citizens, we have to create that mandate for them to do this. Otherwise, they won't have the almost confidence, I guess, to go and make those kinds of decisions with climate change at the heart of these decisions that they're making. So I think that's one way we can. But again, this is something that I'm constantly thinking about, how we continue to strengthen and the pressure we continue to put on.
And I think pressure comes from, or a strong voice comes from a collective, from
100%.
Collectivizing the energy and passion and knowledge that people actually have. It's not just about community building, but it's about finding allies, building networks, and also coalitions, right?
And that's exactly what happened with the strike, with standing alongside PSA, standing alongside First Union, and the unions getting involved with the September 27th strike, and we had businesses, and we had kindergartens, and we had business owners, we had MPs come down and answer our questions. So that whole collective, and that whole, as you said, like that kind of collaboration and kind of cross-pollinating these ideas and these different strategies and these different skills that each of our groups have in their own right, just means that when we come together, we're so much more powerful. And I think that's the only way that 170,000 people were able to be mobilized on that day. And that's one of the only ways I think that we can really create that social mandate, is just by showing, and just by the sheer number of us that there were. And I think that's the other thing about climate change and a just transition. Like, people have their own why, is the way I think of it. So like, for example, like my why and why I kind of do what I do, and kind of feel really passionately about this, is just because I want to get to the end of my life and say I did everything in my power to create a more beautiful world for future generations. And for me, it's that simple, but other people might have other reasons why they feel so passionately about this.
People are really interested in your council work. Sophie, do you actually have a website?
Pretty much via Facebook. So my Facebook's just Sophie Handford. But actually I do have a website, it's just not very regularly updated.
And maybe as a last question, going back to public and community services, how do you envisage the public service to be in the future, to actually make a future happen that doesn't ignore but embrace the environment and equality and social justice?
Whoa. What a banger of a question to end on, I'll tell you. Well, yeah, okay. I would say probably emphasis on meaningful co-design, but not only like meaningful co-design with community, but also with the planet. Like, how can we design this new future kind of alongside the planet and the planet's needs, is also something that I think we need to keep in mind and top of mind. But as I said at the beginning, and what I will mention in my chapter when that comes out, is taking people with us, putting climate change at the heart of our decision making, building community resilience and social infrastructure, and acknowledging what kind of things we might have to give up and ways that we might have to change. So, if the community isn't feeling engaged with or listened to, or if the public service or community service isn't working for them and people are expressing that, then I think it's about saying, okay, we've got to change. And it's just about saying there are more important things at play right now. Like, we're currently in conversations about the future of the entire planet. And that's an extremely important thing. So if we have to own up to some, if we have to kind of own the things that we need to change, and we need to be open, I think, to changing those things. And exactly what that looks like, I don't think I've got it figured out, but I know that there are so many people who can feed into that conversation, and as well.
I think the answer to that question lies in the idea that the future is there for us to shape, and it's not pre-created, or like nothing is fixed. So
exactly,
believing in that you can actually shape it and create something that is better and different what we are seeing right now, a transformation really, might be at least the basis of the answer, and how we shape concrete actions building on that belief that change is possible. I think, it needs to be developed by all of us. As you said, we are all an important part actually of this bigger thing, of the bigger answer to big questions actually.
Yeah, that's the way I'm feeling, especially at the moment. I feel like these questions are big. I think that nothing is kind of beyond all of us, and we all have, different, as I said, different understanding and different experience and skills to bring to this conversation, and everyone has a part in this conversation and a valued role and a valued space. So I think that just making sure that people are aware of that and their ability to influence the future and create the future that we want, or create the journey to a planet that we feel proud to pass on.
Thank you. That's amazing, and I think it will resonate with our audience, and especially with PSA members, because that's why we are in the PSA, and that's what we are trying to do every day as a collective, as a union, especially in the workplace, but with a much broader, I guess, agenda than just workplace issues, in terms of the environment, in terms of the broader social and economic injustices that we face. So it's a big task, and I guess we have to continue working at it, and we'll be successful in the end if we are doing it all together. So
and just conversations. I don't think we could ever have enough conversations like this.
I agree.
So I think we need to continue talking to one another about these kinds of things, and continue to build community in our own areas, but also on a national scale, so that we can combat climate crisis.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we actually reached the end of this conversation, which hopefully is just the beginning of many more conversations that people are having with friends and family and colleagues, and that we are going to have definitely within the PSA and within the public and community services. So I would like to thank you, Sophie. Amazing conversation. I could actually continue for another couple of hours talking with you and discussing aspects of the social and the environmental issues that we are dealing with. But we have to bring it to an end for now. I hope our audience has enjoyed the conversations as well. Thank you so much for all the questions. I mean, I'm very much aware that we couldn't get through all of them, but they will certainly inspire our thinking here at the PSA, and especially me and the policy team. And I'm sure Sophie will take them on board as well in her role as a councillor and in her work as a climate activist. And we hope to see you all on the 13th of May. So thank you all, and stay well.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.